And I'm going to begin talking about Bolivia, which I mentioned. People who follow the show probably know that in November 2019 there was a coup, a U.S.-backed military coup that removed the democratically elected president Evo Morales, a socialist, an anti-imperialist, and the first and only indigenous president in a majority indigenous country. And we've talked about the coup many times and the fascistic elements. The coup leader, Janine Áñez, after she helped overthrow this government with the backing of the U.S. and elements of the military who were bribed, she went into the presidential palace with a giant Bible and said that never again will God be taken away from the palace. And then her fellow coup mongers said that Pachamama, which is the indigenous earth spirit, will never again enter the presidential palace, which was, their Christian theocratic medieval way of saying indigenous people will never come back to power. Janine Áñez, the coup leader, is now in prison and going through a judicial process to face justice in Bolivia for the crimes she committed. And of course, the U.S. government and other Western governments have been lobbying for her release, claiming that she's a political prisoner, which is absolutely insane. I mean, it says a lot about who Washington and Brussels consider to be political prisoners. If you overthrow your democratically elected government and then massacre protesters and then proceed to sell off your country to foreign corporations, and then your coup regime is defeated at the ballot box, and then you face justice, then you're a so-called political prisoner, according to Washington, if they back you. And of course, if there was a coup, it means they probably backed you. So for anyone who has followed this story, they have probably seen that there has been this narrative for years now, going back to the very day of the coup in November 2019, that supposedly it was not a coup. In fact, the president, Evo Morales, who was democratically elected, he was a dictator, supposedly, because he was running for office again. And yes, it's true that he was going to run a fourth term, but it's pretty hilarious because a lot of these same people who defended the coup in Bolivia and said it wasn't a coup, they are the same people who will say things like, oh, I wish Obama could run again. I would love to vote for Obama a third and a fourth and a fifth time. And then Obama's wife should run, and then his daughter should run. Or the Clintons. I mean, they basically, of course, there are Republicans who say this too, but many of them are liberal imperialist Democrats, and they would love to have a permanent presidency that never changes of Obama. But then when you have an actually good progressive anti-imperialist president like Evo Morales, oh no, you shouldn't be able to vote for him again. So they claimed that supposedly, even though he won the election freely and fairly, he was a dictator, in scare quotes, and that the military had to intercede, had to intervene to prevent him from being president. Now, if the military tells a democratically elected leader they have to resign, in my book, that's pretty much definitionally a coup, a military coup. Of course, you saw all these pundits in the U.S. bend over backward, bend into a pretzel to try to figure out how to justify this, saying that it wasn't a coup. The Organization of American States did this whole thing, claiming that there was fraud. It was all a lie, all ridiculous nonsense. Well, now, for anyone who tried to claim that it wasn't a coup, I mean, that myth, it should have been dead many years ago, but there's no way to justify that nonsense argument anymore. And why do I say that? Because there is a story right now that is across the Latin American Spanish language media and has gotten, a surprise, almost no coverage in English, because the English language media, mainstream media, just is a handmaiden for Western governments, specifically the U.S. government. But in some Spanish language media outlets, they've been reporting this bombshell story. And one of the only outlets to reported on it in English, and they definitely deserve credit, is Causacho News, or the friends of the show over there, Ali Vargas and the whole team, Camila Escalante, and all the team there in Bolivia. They're awesome. So they just published this piece, which is a translation of the Spanish language reports, revealed Evo Morales and the Mexican Air Force dodged RPG rocket during 2019 rescue. And again, I want to stick this in the face of all of the good liberal interventionists who insisted that Evo Morales was supposedly a dictator and that it was not a coup. It was absolutely a coup. And we now have evidence that in the coup, backed by the US, they tried to kill Evo. They didn't just overthrow him, they tried to murder him. So here is the story. I'll read it. The Mexican Air Force has revealed that a projectile, that is a rocket, was launched against the plane in which they rescued President Evo Morales as he took off from the airport in the small town of Chimoré in the tropic region of Bolivia in November 2019. A document from the National Defense Secretariat published in President Andrés Manuel López Obrador's latest book, that is the President of Mexico, details that since the time they were at the airport, this is in November 2019, an element of the Bolivian armed forces targeted the aircraft with an RPG rocket launcher. Oh, yeah, definitely sounds like it's not a coup. All that happened is some people in the military tried to shoot the elected president with an RPG rocket launcher, but definitely not a coup. The Washington Post and New York Times told me it wasn't a coup. And you can see, I mean, it continues here. During the initial ascent, the pilot, this is the Mexican pilot, was able to observe from the left side of the cockpit, nearing 1,500 feet above the ground, saw a light trail similar to the characteristic of a rocket at 7 o'clock position below the horizon. The pilot estimates that if it is a projectile, the point from which it was launched could be located in the vicinity of the Chimoré airport in Cochabamba. So I've been to Chimoré. I went there with the Gray Zone team, with Max Blumenthal and Anya Parempo, and we interviewed one of the members of a politician of the Movement Towards Socialism party who was tortured, who was brutally attacked and tortured by these US-backed coup-monger elements. And she had her hair cut, shaved, and then these insane coup-mongers they trotted her around the city and tortured her and threw paint on her and hit her with sticks and attacked her and publicly humiliated her. And then she was the democratically elected mayor, by the way. Arce, Patricia Arce, of no relation to the president, Luis Arce. Arce is a common last name. And then after the coup succeeded, for a year, she was intimidated. Her pets were killed. Her family members were threatened, and all of these horrible things. And we interviewed her. I'm going to get up the story. This is Patricia Arce over at the Gray Zone. We interviewed her, and we went to the town where she worked in Cochabamba. Cochabamba is like this part of the tropic region of Bolivia and has a lot of campesinos and indigenous people. And you can see here, it's called How Bolivia's New Socialist Senator Resisted Coup Terror. Meet MAS party leader Patricia Arce. She is from the MAS, M-A-S, that's the Movement Towards Socialism party. And she was a mayor, again, democratically elected, and now she's a senator. And you can see this photo here on the left of her being tortured, and they threw red paint on her and all this. It was just so horrible. So we interviewed her in this place, Chimoré. And you can watch the video. In fact, here, I'll play part of the video, and you can see right here, this little thing. This is like in the town center, and it says Chimoré right there. So I was there, and it's an incredible place. And so what happened during the coup is Chimoré has been a base for the Movement Towards Socialism party. It's a base for Evo Morales' support base and social movements, progressive social movements and labor unions. And during the coup, Evo Morales was hiding there, and then he fled. He was hiding for a while because the military forced him to resign, and he was worried that he was going to be killed during the coup. So he went to Chimoré, and then he took a flight, and it was a plane that was provided by the Mexican government, by the Mexican Air Force. So this is when he was being evacuated. This was not only an attempt to kill the elected president, Evo Morales, it was also an attempt to attack an aircraft belonging to a foreign country, which is basically an act of war. So we now know, because of the Mexican president, that, again, to reiterate for people who are confused, after the coup, Evo Morales was hiding for a while, and then he got support from the Mexican government. He was given asylum, and they sent a plane to take him out of the country for his safety. And when the plane came out of that small town I just showed, Chimoré in Cochabamba in the tropic region of Bolivia, some troops shot a rocket launcher, an RPG, at the Mexican Air Force's plane, trying to kill Evo Morales and the Mexican Air Force pilots to succeed in the coup. I mean, if that's not a coup, what is a coup? I mean, it's absolutely preposterous. So, of course, you're not going to see this in mainstream corporate media in English. It's getting very little coverage. It's getting coverage more in Spanish. This is Telesur, and it says that it's revealed that coup plotters tried to kill Evo Morales. And you can see this is from the Mexican government. And it says that López Obrador, the president of Mexico, mentions in his book that in Mexico, when they were rescuing Evo Morales, and also it was related to the president of the U.S., Donald Trump, who of course backed the coup. So, I mean, I'm not going to play this video here because it's in Spanish, but it's absolutely incredible. Here's another tweet. Extraordinary recognition by the Mexican president, López Obrador, specifically naming this military officer who was important in the mission to save the life of Evo Morales. And then he's thanking this person. He's talking about the Mexican soldier. You are brave and loyal, like an exemplary citizen. So in Mexico, this is a really big deal. Of course, when something happens in Mexico, the U.S. media doesn't care, because if it doesn't happen in the West, if it doesn't happen in the 10% of the community made up by the U.S. and Europe and Canada and Australia and New Zealand, then they don't care. Or in Israel, apartheid Israel, they don't care. But in Mexico right now, this is a huge scandal.